everyone was happy with that, and we are all poised and ready to go. So great selection of conversations today. I'm also joined by Emily today, who is going to be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you've got questions or comments and your reflections as you're hearing the presentations, then please do put them in the chat. And if we have time, we'll feed them in. But if not, then at least we've got them captured so that we can feed them into future TCI discussions.
I have to leave at 6 sharp, and so does Antonio.
Me
That's
too.
Fine.
Me too.
So I'm going to go Antonio first, then Annie, then Tony, then Bethan, if you're happy with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. All good. So Antonio, do you want to talk to us about your experiences and particularly for the European Alliance Against Coronavirus?
Thank you, Madeleine. Claudia, can you show the presentation on the screen? Thank you, Claudia. So very quickly, yes, I don't know if many of you know about the European Cluster Alliance. It is a quite new association, federation. Okay, could you pass the slide, please, Claudia? We were born past year, okay, as the Federation, Pan-European Federation of National Association of Clusters. 13, there are no more, as far as we know, okay? The other countries that doesn't have those kind of associations are being included through what we call ambassadors, okay? So we have clusters participating from Germany, Italy, Greece, Ireland, and many other countries, and that is good for us. And during the past meeting of 3 weeks ago, we decided also to integrate a pan-European thematic network of clusters. The first one, for example, was CIBER, the network of bioregions, okay? And we, as I say, we were born with the intention, the main goal of being the voice of the European clusters, but we face very, very quickly a big challenge, as everyone of us here, okay? It was just on March. Could you go for the next slide, please? On the 16th of March, we sent an email to the European Commission, putting our resources as networks to the disposal of the Commission. And they answered us very quickly, just in 1 hour, telling us that they needed to find companies in Europe with capacities on 3D printing, advanced material for masks, or respirators, okay? And we put our networks immediately at work, and in just 4 days, we were able to send to the Commission one database with more than 1,300 companies across Europe, putting their resources at the disposal of the Commission, okay? Voluntarily and without looking for benefits. And in fact, it was during something like 2 months, we were coordinating and facilitating many contacts between companies, the European Commission, the national or regional governments, in order to help wherever we could on the needs that were arising. First, from the health system, but very quickly also from the problems with the supply chain, even the discontinuation of some services, sometimes critical services, okay? And we very soon also saw the need to coordinate our actions, not only with clusters within our networks, but also with others that were participating very actively on that efforts, okay? So we created what we call the European Alliance Against Coronavirus, that is composed by many different actors, including civil associations, civil movements as the coronavirus makers, or Frena la Curva, or Plano de Acção in Portugal, others from My Life the Scene in Italy, many others, okay? And also, I don't know, hundreds of representatives from the European Commission, national governments, and regional governments. When I say hundreds, we will see the number later. It's true. It's literally true. We have been meeting daily from March, discussing a wide variety of topics. Next slide, please. So the main idea is that we were sharing leadership. It was just the need that drive the decision to not to discuss about who was more important than other, just looking for understanding what very quickly what was happening, looking for needs and possible solutions, copying the best references that we had, and transfer it and acting very quickly. And I will give you just one example. In March, we have a reference on the same day that the French government published the regulation of a new mask for the population, and in that regulation, the cluster Textera was key in the definition of that regulation. We were able to send the information to the Spanish government. We facilitated contact by phone during the weekend, and just in 4 days, Spain homologated the same regulation that France. And it was critical because at that moment, there were not regulation for our companies to produce, manufacture masks for the population. So this is the kind of exchanges that we were involved. Next slide, please. And that was at the beginning, March, April, May. On May, the European Commission announced the creation of the Rapid Alert function that was composed by the different actors, okay? Some chambers of commerce, the European Enterprise Network, but also, and I would say mainly, clusters. And so we signed a contract with the European Commission to act as detectors and providers of solutions. And so we have been from middle May to August, providing weekly reports to the European Commission on disruptions on Europe, and we identified 84 main disruptions and possible solutions from the industry. And I need to clarify that if the industry was able to, or the clusters, to implement immediately any kind of solutions or remedy, we didn't expect anything from the Commission. We worked immediately on it, okay? So it was not just work for reporting, but also to solving, if possible, okay? And this was done during the period until August, and from September onwards until now, and just, we keep on it, we have been working on the definition of the national recovery plans. And we have been providing information, resources, examples, dialogue to the clusters, but also to our national and regional authorities on how to best define those national recovery plans, and whenever possible or whenever it makes sense, it's very common, to introduce cluster on them. Okay, next slide, please. So this is some statistics. We have until now we have been meeting more than 150 times. Okay, from beginning this month we have passed to 3 weeks, 3 times a week, not daily. Okay, so now we are meeting on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. The sessions are public. The link is always the same, and you have there the link to the European Cluster Collaboration Platform, where you can see the list of all the previous recording. For sure, you are invited to join us whenever you want. Okay, more than 1,200 experts or near, and more than 7,000 accumulated participants. And we have been following the new approach of Europe to the industrial ecosystem. So we have been analyzing those ecosystem. We have received experts from every one of them in the EC. And just to go quick to the next slide, please. We have identified some key concepts. One of them is that we need to analyze co-evolving ecosystem, not just, it's not enough to look for every one of them. There are many linkages, critical linkages to from one to the rest, or most of the rest. And we have identified keystone agents that are those nodes that link different ecosystems and that make them more flexible, they gave them the capacity to adapt. Okay, and the next slide, please. This is very important in the next concept, that is the concept of resilience. Resilience is a property of the network, not of the node. Okay, and this is very important. Dense networks are those that are densely connected between inside the network, but also outside with other networks. And those are far more flexible, adaptable, resilient. Okay, and this is part in it's a fundamental part of the clusters. So clusters, this is the main message, are key for one of the new priorities at European level, for the priority of making our economy more resilient. We are linking companies. We can help them to establish new supply chains or new ways to produce, or to find new suppliers in specific situations. Next slide, please. So I don't have time to go to the details of the reports. We made some many studies on the keywords, and we don't have time. Okay, but I am sure that we will have more occasions to speak about that. Next slide. We have been also working on in defending and highlighting the importance and the opportunities of involved clusters on the smart specialization strategies, not only in the definition phases, but also the others, the implementation. And this is a slide about the I3, Interregional Innovation Investment Initiative. And I think that there is only one slide more, if I am right. I wanted to share with you the flagships of the recovery plans. Claudia, can you go to the next one? And this is the last. We are working, as I said before, on examples, ideas, guidelines to build proposals on those 7 European flagships for the Next Generation EU initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Antonio. Really good to hear that, and impressive the speed with which clusters came to the fore and really stepped up to the challenge that was COVID, and the reach that you've managed to get through digital engagement is also impressive. So thank you very much for that, Antonio. Can I move to Annie to talk about your experience within Flanders?
Sure. Thank you, Madeline. Can you put on the presentation? Actually, I completely agree with what Antonio said. Clusters had a role in their quick response during the crisis, but the clusters also have a role in the resilience, in the economic resilience. And I will just highlight two of the slides of this to underline it, how it worked in Flanders. Next slide, please. I was planning to give you an introduction of Flanders, but actually you were all in Flanders. You all came to the TCI conference last year, of course. So you all know Flanders and you all know our cluster program. So I will not detail, I need not give the detailed information on that. So you can move to the next slide, where our cluster program is set with the companies in the driver's seat, really steered by the companies. Next slide, please. So when we look then to the figures for Flanders, we now have 6 spearhead clusters. We have had so far 20 smaller cluster organizations, and in the total, they bring more than 3,000 companies together. And it's because the number is that large that they were so quickly to respond during the COVID crisis. I'll come back to that later. These are some financial things. We support them with money for their working, and they also have additional money for projects. On the next slide, you see the money that they have for projects. In 2019, there were 62 projects with over 80 million support from Flanders innovation and entrepreneurship. These are our 6 spearhead clusters, but you can go to the next slide. And there you see what the clusters did during the COVID crisis. Clusters also already proved to be valuable partners during the crisis because they brought companies together and they took actions to solve urgent problems. I'll give just 2 examples for Flanders. First example is Catalysti, our spearhead cluster on chemistry and plastics. They brought companies together very quickly to produce protective face masks, which was in March, April, a real issue in Flanders to have these masks available. The second example is the logistics cluster. As you know, a lot of companies had to close, a lot of bars and restaurants closed, but of course, people needed food and toilet paper, and needed to come to be brought to the grocery stores. So the logistics was a very key sector to keep alive. Wild started, for example, our logistics cluster, they started, for example, a project to test tools that would warn you if your social distancing, your 1.5 meters in Flanders was not respected. So it's with Bluetooth and with a little alarm when you come too close to each other. And for the workers in the logistics sector, that was very important because they go to companies, to other facilities without really having control on the social distance. So that worked very well. And then, of course, next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oops, is my sound still there?
Yes, it is. We'll see if you can move on to the next slide.
Sorry, it doesn't get stuck.
Oh. Well, on the next slide, I show some difficulties that the clusters have now after the crisis, they bring companies together. They used to do it on a table, having a chat, organizing brainstorms around the table, working at post-its, having informal discussions during meetings, after meetings, in the bar, etc. And all of a sudden, this way of life became impossible. So they very quickly changed to, exactly what we are doing today, talking to a screen, having different faces on the screen. So the clusters, they really needed to reinvent themselves in all these activities and very quickly learn to use these new tools. And they proved themselves even more than before how necessary they are to connect people together, to connect companies and universities, to connect companies to the government, etc. So they really proved that that's what they do good, and they switched very quickly to their new way of doing that. And then the next slide, please. And then after these few months of real crisis situation, March, April, in Flanders, the government decided to have two advisory teams on economic advisory and on societal recovery with some long-term actions. And now these reports, these advice reports, are brought together in the Flemish resilience handbook for the next period. And no surprise, of course, that innovation clusters are named as part of the resilience. They will work together with the government to face this situation and to support economic resilience. The clusters are mentioned to connect the companies to the regional transformation priorities, Industry 4.0, digitalization, climate initiatives, circular economy. Clusters are really kind of speaking the language of the company, so they are bringing the companies very quickly up to speed on these new themes, on these new priorities for the government. So it's very important, and the government really sees them as an important connector and an important translator from policy to real life in the company. So we also mention in the resilience report that the clusters will connect more to the international scene, to the international ecosystems. Again, also connecting them to research and development initiative on an international scale. Because this COVID, but also other societal problems like climate or Industry 4.0, it's not a Flemish problem. It's not only Flanders coping with that. A lot of other regions have the same difficulties. So they stimulate now the clusters also to connect to this international scene on these topics. So that's a very encouraging initiative as well. And of course, we will do that connection together with FIT, who was our partner last year also for the TCI conference. And of course, the resilience plans, they strive for economic growth, for jobs, and for the transformation of the industry. And actually, we are very happy as cluster group that the clusters are so well mentioned in these economic resilience reports or advices from the government. That ends my talk. Thank you for listening to me. And well, I don't know if there's time for questions. I just want to say, if you want to learn more on the clusters in Flanders, there's the final conference of Cluster X tomorrow, and you can still register for that to listen from 10 to 12. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Annie. That was great and good to hear. Once again, really good to hear about clusters having a role in resilience. And I'm also really encouraged about how policymakers seem to be really understanding that clusters can be part of the solution, and including them in the recovery plans. sometimes I think the clusters have a bit of a battle to try and get their voice heard, and this seems to have been an opportunity for that battle to have been, strategies are being aligned, which is really good to see.
And it's kind of what Antonio explained. They acted very quickly in the crisis situation, and that made them convincible partners for the government now afterwards for their resilience. Exactly.
So that's a really good showcasing the value of clusters, which is good to see. I'm really aware of time. I know you and Antonio have to go at 6, as does Emily, but I'm keen as well to hear from Tony and from the partners in Wales as well, Bethan or Ffion. I'm not quite sure which one is presenting. But I'm going to move to Tony now so that you get a chance to share what you've been doing in Taiwan.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I only got 1-page slides, so my fellow TCI friend can just take a break and have some coffee. It's okay. So yeah, hello everyone. This is Tony from E3 Taiwan. Actually, it's quite close to midnight in Taiwan, so good evening. So I'm very glad to have this chance to share my experience again. My institute, E3, or Industrial Technology Research Institute, is a national research center in Taiwan. We are not only the leaders of local industrial cluster in North Taiwan, but also the fintech of Taiwanese government. That's why our strategy, including the industrial level, the national level, and the international level. First of all, in the industrial level, we form a strategy blueprint for our cluster members. The blueprint focuses on 3 parts: smart living, quality health, and sustainable environment. Those are the most important territory, we think, in the new normal age. Every week we promote the different case study and the research report to help our members to understand the latest development of this 3-part territory. We also emphasize on the innovation of medical technology and the circular economy. For example, we recently promote a new kind of handful testing system that can detect coronavirus in 1 hour. And the second one is about the national level. The topic is very simple, just like Antonio and Annie say, resilient. That is, when a new disaster strikes, our economy will be able to minimize the negative impact and maximize the capability of recovery. And in order to do that, we like to help the government to build up the stronger ecosystem and help the companies adopt the change of international supply chain. Actually, I got an example. This is an echo spread. And when the pandemic happened, this one becomes so popular and everyone wants to buy that. And our government and companies, of course, know that. But soon they face a big problem. Actually, we got a company to produce the echo. We got a company to produce the container. But we don't have any company to produce the spray hand. Why? Because this one is used to be produced in mainland China. And at that time, no one tried to export the spray hand. Of course, it became a huge warning signal for our government. Since that, my institute has helped the government rebuild the ecosystem that will be able to produce some necessary tools just like a spray hand. We also provide our partners with some strategy like adjustment of supply chain. We also focus on the SMEs. We all know that in the new normal, digitalization and the digital transformation will become more and more important. But local SMEs, just like you guess, always have not enough resource and information to do that. In order to help them, we help the government promote a policy initiative, which not only provide a subsidy for the SMEs to buy some digital solutions, but also we provide some free guideline and consulting service for the SMEs which plan to move forward on the digital transformation. We know that it is impossible for the SMEs to finish the transformation in very short run. At least we give them the basic tool, and that could be a good beginning. Finally, we are happy to share our idea and experience about the new normal to the international community, just like what I'm doing now. Actually, on the September, several VIPs just visit E3, including the Senate Chairman of Czech Republic, Mr. Vizik, the Mayor of Prague, Mr. Herjip, and many congressmen of Czech Republic. We have shown them our medical innovation of COVID-19, and we have signed some cooperation deal. Therefore, we welcome every kind of international collaboration. So this is my presentation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tony. It's really good to see, as you say, the different levels, both at your institution, the national and then the international level. And I think one of the things that's coming through all the presentations is that clusters are in this crisis have not been just looking locally, but have been looking much broader, and how can they connect with others and make that wider contribution. And I think the word of the day is resilience. That seems to be coming up in every presentation. So thank you very much for sharing your story from Taiwan. And lastly, because I'm keen that everyone gets a good chance to share their competitive strategy transformation story, I'm going to bring on our Bethan from Wales to talk about what's been happening about the fine food cluster in that part of the world.
Thanks, Madeline. And it's going to be a double act. Ffion and myself are going to present.
Brilliant.
So yeah, good afternoon, Pnawn Da. So our presentation is about the Food and Drink Wales Cluster Network. So talking from a food and drink perspective, we just thought we'd just put a nice slide in there for North Wales, that's Snowdonia. We're a very strong farming and food nation. Next slide, please. So there are 700 companies in the sector, dominated by SMEs and micro scale. There are some larger businesses and multinationals, but on the whole, it's SME. Key categories across the range: dairy, we've got great cheese making sector, meat, Welsh beef and lamb, bakery, alcohol, grocery, and so on. So right across the piece, really. 20,000 jobs supported in manufacturing. Next slide, please. So just wanting to introduce really, Welsh Government embarked on a cluster strategy 4 years ago with the industry to set up a cluster network. There's 400 plus companies in that network. Ffion is going to talk to you about some examples from the fine food cluster, drinks cluster and honey cluster. We also have the Nutri Wales group that's looking at future foods, horticulture, seafood, a special interest export group, and a chief executives group as well. The organisations behind this, as we would call them, cluster leads, are from a range of organisations, including not-for-profit, universities, local authorities, and commercial organisations, quite a range. Next slide, please. So before Ffion speaks about some of the examples, I just thought I'd make some opening remarks, really. If we take us back to March, the pandemic obviously caused a great impact in terms of hospitality, tourism and events, which are very important sectors in terms of sales for the food and drink industry. A third of companies were adversely affected, very seriously. A further third were also badly affected. Retail in itself got very hot in terms of supply chain, and there were great pressures there as well. But what the cluster network did really is the speed of response. It came into its own, really, in terms of the networks that were there. It could immediately be switched on. So in terms of cluster managers dealing one-to-one with companies as they pivoted, maybe their marketing strategy, looking at new customers and so on, but also cluster meetings going online immediately, and companies being able to communicate, being able to make sense of this crisis and to orientate. buyers were invited on those calls, so you can understand what's happening in the wider sector. Also being based in many companies in rural Wales, helping to connect them. The policy as well context was important as well, because in terms of financial support, understanding the financial pressures the companies were on, that was then fed directly into policy and Welsh Government and ministers. So then financial support then was devised, and then that was then put into action. So that was in the first phase of the pandemic. And in terms of the cluster leads themselves, they were meeting every other day. We called it the 201 group. It still meets, it's meeting now once a week, but it was meeting every other day, and it provided vital communication. New services were devised very quickly, and Ffion will give you some examples, and new collaborations, and that's what we're seeing really. It's speeding up collaboration. And I guess there are some silver linings in all this situation. Other areas to mention were in terms of care homes and food banks, because retail was under so much pressure, helping them to find food. The cluster network provided a practical resource really in terms of their trade contacts and helping people like Fair Share with their distribution. Also, in terms of the supermarkets, our organisation, Mentor Business, managed the relationship with supermarkets on behalf of the Welsh Government, and having an open line of communication, because they were having issues with supply. So we were able to identify companies in the cluster network, and obviously that provided a new sales opportunity. We are in the sort of phase now in terms of the COVID recovery plan. The clusters are a key element of that plan, and we have formed a resilience group from the cluster leads, and that is being implemented, so around competitiveness, innovation, so on. And we have a new support program in terms of finance for that, which is just being put in. It's just opening now. So I'll hand over now to Ffion.
Thank you, Bethan. Hello, everybody. Flanders. Can we have the next slide, please? So the Fine Food Cluster has around 100 members, and the key purpose of the cluster is to provide an industry network and a support mechanism for the business growth. So we hold monthly cluster meetings where we share market data, updates from the sector, as well as government updates, and also provide a check-in for cluster members' well-being and mental resilience by allowing them to share their experiences through the network. As Bethan mentioned, it also provides a very important two-way dialogue from businesses through the cluster to policymakers upstream and downstream. We also support our cluster members with access to specialist mentors and online workshops on a variety of topics, such as business strategy, commercial, marketing, and in particular nowadays, digital marketing, ensuring digital functionality is up to speed. If we go on to the next slide, please, I'll just give some practical examples of how these support instruments have helped the cluster redesign their strategies during COVID-19. So one example is a company called Daffodil Foods, a dessert company based in the beautiful Llŷn Peninsula in North Wales. Usually they sell clotted cream to the food service industry, but after lockdown found themselves with tremendous amount of surplus stock. Now, using the cluster network, they worked together with a local bakery, a tea and coffee producer, a cheese maker, and a jam maker to create a new product, an afternoon tea kit that was sold online direct to consumers to be used as an at-home treat or to give as a gift during lockdown. A buy local online map of Wales was also created by the Fine Food Cluster and the Honey Cluster that showed consumers where to get local food and drink in their area, which was particularly important while we were in lockdown. This was supported by a wider campaign called Cari Cymru, Cari Blas in Welsh, Love Wales, Love Taste, driven by Food and Drink Wales and the Welsh Government. This campaign gained traction in the Welsh media, had around 3 million hits online, and really helped drive the purchasing decisions of consumers inward towards Welsh producers. Can we have the next slide, please? Thank you. So another clustering initiative that I'd like to talk about is a project called the Wye Valley Producers. This is a collaboration of 19 food and drink producers in the beautiful Wye Valley area. Now, when their individual routes to market were disrupted, they came together and pivoted their business model collectively to create a click and collect business So here, customers could pre-purchase food online, from staples through to luxury items, collect from a central site with orders delivered directly into the boot of their cars, allowing a safe, socially distanced transaction. Now, such was the success of this collaboration that the Y Valley Producers has recently formalised as a legal business entity themselves, and they plan to adopt a more permanent home for their click and collect, as well as providing jobs for local people in the area. We'll go on to the next slide, please, that Beth will touch upon.
Thanks, Ffion. So this is a slide just mentioning our Tuckin event. It's usually held as an event, a physical event, but obviously this had to happen online on digital platform. And just to mention really that I think the fact that it was online as well, we had some of the UK's top brands speaking about how they pivoted, how they'd marketed in a crisis, and it worked so well. 250 delegates were attending. The feedback from companies was amazing, and that it was inspirational, positive. It were tactics that they could implement immediately. Next slide, please.
I just like to finish off with another practical example from the drinks cluster here in Wales. So again, the drinks cluster have a similar membership, around 100, as well as 4 special interest groups. Now, their response to COVID included helping distillers in Wales, 10 of them in total, switch their production to hand sanitizer for the healthcare sector. Tony's already alluded on the importance of hand sanitizer during this crisis. Now, the drinks cluster, using their links with food technology centres, science hubs and the fiscal sector, supported with technical guidance, labelling guidance and any duty implications. The drinks cluster also ran a Welsh Wine Week, promoting the burgeoning Welsh wine scene, and are currently working closely with the Fine Food cluster on a Welsh Christmas food and drink pairing campaign. Next slide, please. So that's really a snapshot of how the cluster network in Wales have helped Welsh companies redesign their competitive strategies during COVID-19. Diolch, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. I think it's unbelievably cruel that we've had such lovely pictures of food and drink from Wales presented to us as our final presentation of the day, because that's certainly making me hungry and thirsty. Really good to see again about how collaborations have been speeded up, as you said, through the clusters and in response to the pandemic. And in some ways, it came across very strongly that there's become a network of networks through the work of Food and Drink Wales, which has been really good to try and precipitate that. We are very nearly out of time. There's probably a time for one question, so I'm going to sneak it in, which is really just there's obviously been some changes and some new things. Do you think that those new initiatives and those new collaborations will keep going? So if I can ask either Bethan or Ffion or Tony if you're still online.
Okay. I think yes, the answer is yes, because actually the total environment just changed. I can give you an example, like digitalization. Before the pandemic, everyone, when it comes to digitalization, everyone will say, okay, I know it is important, but not so hurry, right? Yeah, I don't have money, I don't have a resource, so that topic could be not so soon, so not so hurry. But when the pandemic has struck, everyone start to think, oh my God, I need to do that because this one is not just important, it's necessary. So the entire, the entire environment, the entire ecosystem already changed. So the change will keep going. Yep.
That's good. Bethan, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I think the business environment has changed, in retail, for example, Amazon, it in terms of speeding up its development, the changes in retail, there are lots of changes already happening, and this has just speeded it up. And you can see in terms of retail, there's going to be less opportunities because retailers are streamlining, they're rationalizing, cost cutting. So yeah, I think collaborations. We've seen producers come together to collaborate to approach retailers and companies that wouldn't come together before. So I can see that it's changed. Everything's changed.
I think that's a really interesting point, is that you know, there's always a balance between competition and collaboration within clusters, and sometimes it can be a bit of a challenge to find the reasons for collaboration. And I think we couldn't have wished for it, and we wouldn't have wanted it, but this crisis has given a real reason to collaborate, to come together for joint strategies and show the benefit of working together. So it's good to showcase some of the things that you've talked about today.
Thank you.
I would very happily talk clusters and some of these transformational stories all evening, but we do have to rejoin the main room. So if I can say thank you very much to our speakers. Thank you for contributing to the chat alongside as well, and please can you rejoin the main room.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.